welcome to the talk of securing open source projects. We are so happy to be here. And I am Ragasharee. I'm a graduate student at Carnegie Mellon, and I'm also a technical lead at CNCF Technical Advisory Group for Security. I've done a bunch of stuff over 4 or 5 years of my career in information security, and I have with me Anoop Chandra. He is a security software engineer at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. And today we will be talking about our open source experience being open source contributors ourselves, what is our journey in enabling security, and why it's important for the ecosystem. To begin with, as an open source contributor, something that really excites me is knowing that 90% of the companies in one way or the other use open source software. And more often than not, some of the contributions look something like this tiny little thing that we don't know exists. We don't know what vulnerabilities are coming from, who is maintaining it, how long has it been that the development has stopped, or is there anything going on in those projects. There have been a lot of developments with SBOM, secure software supply chain, and everything to maintain what are all the dependencies in our projects. And we are yet to go a long way through that. And vulnerabilities, something like Log4j and the Heartbleed and Apache-related vulnerabilities have shown us that it's really critical to know what is in our supply chain and make sure all the dependencies that we have, especially the ones coming from open source, is secure. And if there is given an option between 2 different dependencies, we make a choice on the secure one. The severity of the situation is so high that even government is watching for the open source security initiatives, and CISA is the one who is taking this effort forward, and there are several bills that's being endorsed by the government as well. And the effort is being translated into multiple initiatives such as secure design and the CISA's different open source security initiatives, and OpenSSF being one of them, and CNCF particularly for the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And there are multiple different checklists and kind of reference architectures and guidelines and everything for developers to follow. But when it comes to what exactly they need to do, they're overwhelmed with a lot of information, and especially for budding open source projects, to know where to begin and what kind of actionable steps they need to take, that's becoming a challenge. And to that end, CNCF's Technical Advisory Group for Security has put together some guidelines to provide a very actionable, bite-sized initiatives for new and upcoming open source projects that they can take right from the beginning and ensure they implement guidelines as soon as the first day of opening the repository, and going ahead with some of the milestones and actionable guidelines. Again, a disclaimer, as with any security product, using this guideline doesn't mean it solves each and every initiatives or security properties that it has to, but this is a good start, and depending on your risk appetite, please feel free to go ahead and use this. The first stop of this guideline is to make sure the source code repository where the code is hosted is itself secure. And to that end, when the repository is opened, make sure to follow the secure code practices, such as enabling 2FA and having strong passwords in the sense of secure keys or personal access tokens and role-based authentication for all the members involved. And the next step, define who the code owners are and who are eligible to make the changes directly in the repository. And for contributors from around the world, make sure the code changes that they are bringing in or any change that they are proposing is following a set of pull requests, and review is done for each of them before it's being merged. And lastly, protect the branches, the critical branches. Some of them have automatic updates installed, and the release features that have been put up in the main branches might be pushing out to many of the users of the project. So make sure those critical branches are protected from who can have the changes, who can make the changes, and what kind of reviews had to be performed before the change is made. And finally, for contributors, you can have issue templates in the sense what are the guidelines to create a new feature, propose a new feature in the ecosystem, or even provide issues. How are they managing any bugs or errors in the ecosystem? How does that happen? And the next is to implement some sort of a security check in the process. It can be CI/CD, it can be pulled based on each and every pull request, and that check can happen in terms of secret scanning and static code analysis and merge checks and everything. So this is some of the basic hygiene checks for code repositories. And once this is implemented, when the project is gaining traction and it's reached to a phase where you know what the goal of the project is, you know who the end users are going to be, what kind of actors and actions are involved in this project, document all of these in terms of a self-assessment guide. This can be as simple as providing an overview of what the goal of the project, who the actors are involved, and what are the security properties essential for your project, and who the end users are going to be, what are their regulatory compliances requirements, and what are the development practices, the secure development practices that are applicable for your technologies, and how are you going to implement them, and what are the measures you've already taken to make sure everything in your project is secure to the extent possible. And this is an updated document, that's a live document updated on each and every milestone of your project, and it can be evolving as you go, but as early as possible using the shift left methodologies. Having this visibility early on will help very much secure your project, and think of that mindset right from the beginning. Now, once your project is going live and people are using it, you may want to make sure there is security awareness for the project, and people know what are the efforts that you've put into in considering what are the secure practices you're developing, and what are the properties you're using, and who your end users, who your security contacts for the projects are, in case anybody wants to contact you. And second is to make sure you have vulnerability disclosures in place. If any security researcher, or any individual for that matter, finds a vulnerability with the project, who do they reach out to, and what is the disclosure process like? And once the disclosure is in place, what's your embargo process? What do you do with that information? That information is very sensitive, and who has access to that information? How long do you have your vulnerability disclosure process? And once the disclosure timeline is out, how are you going to communicate to your stakeholders, the end users? It can be upstream, downstream, all the end users involved, and what kind of information is passed out. Something like the issue details, the severity, the proof of concept, and what's the patch available, and everything of that sort. And finally, how do you respond to incidents? How do you triage to make sure it really is an incident, and define what are the severity and priority of that incident? How do you mitigate it, and how do you communicate to the rest of the community? These are some of the things you may want to look into when you are defining the security awareness and incident response processes. And finally, there are two initiatives from OpenSSF that I'd like to highlight. One is OpenSSF's badging. This is an initiative which is a self-assessment initiative brought up by OpenSSF to highlight the security hygiene, or even the general hygiene of a project, so that all the users who are using it can understand what are the practices implemented, and this is defined by the OpenSSF. They have multiple different criteria, like passing criteria for the bare minimum hygiene that a project is implemented. And for higher level of hygiene, they have something like a silver badge and gold badge. And in the workshop that follows, we will be talking about how do we define all of these things and implement it per project level. And the last one I'd like to talk about is the OpenSSF scorecards. Scorecards is another initiative by OpenSSF that is targeted very much towards the security hygiene of a project. They have about 20 to 30 checks that is implemented, which can be put up in the CI pipeline, or there is a separate tool that can be implemented on a target repository of your choice to determine what are the security procedures that's implemented by their end. And this can be used either by the project maintainer, so they can have a live score up to date with each of their changes, or you can also use this tool to make sure what is the score that is, what is the security score of this particular project, and compare two different dependencies if you ever have to make that choice. Now I'd like to call upon Anoop for the workshop part, And before that, a quick check-in. Is there any open source maintainer or contributor in the audience? Awesome. Which project are you contributing to?
A lot, yeah. Like,
Awesome.
just,
Yeah.
I'm all over the place.
That's amazing. That's amazing. If you have any project you want us to try this on, we'd be more than happy to. Otherwise, we have a bunch of initial templates that we can share across and help you with this process.
So before I start, isn't it amazing? Like, I've seen even in my company, especially for small scale projects or even the open source projects, you could even manage your entire milestones, everything in GitHub. So before we start, what I would like to start off with this, the CNCF project template. I think initially she showed the security best practices guide from the CNCF. That's where they define the contributing guides, code owners, how should be the embargo policies, security policies, and things like that. So what as part of those initiatives, CNCF has released a lot of project templates. These are for projects. If you are starting fresh projects or a new project, you could start off with this. You can use this template, and that will give you the base foundation. And good thing about this template is there are a lot of guided, I would say, like steps which you can follow to make sure those are met. So like just for example, like let's say if I take the contributing elements, so they've already defined what needs to be there in these contribution guidelines. So then you can look at pull request lifecycle. So you can just explain what this pull request lifecycle is and start off with that. So yeah, first step on this is use the CNCF project template, and from there we start from there, right? So next step on this is to protect the branches. So that you go to the settings of your project, go to branch, and add a branch protection rule. So let's say for now I just say main. I'll say require pull request before merging. I'll keep it to 1 right now. I can pick those settings, and just one setting I think I would. Yeah, there are these small tiny settings we kind of miss out on when we set up the branch protection or things. One is this: do not allow bypass of this setting, right? So if for a long time there was this project where we had not enabled this. What this allows people to do is, let's say there's some admin or his token got leaked or something, he could just come back and merge start, even if they're not admins, right? Even if they're with people with right access, they can start merging code by bypassing. So these are some of the tiny settings we try to overlook at. So but yeah, make sure you select that option when you are adding branch protection rules. So next, I think I'll slightly go to the OpenSSF scorecard. I think I have already set it up on one of them. And the best thing about OpenSSF scorecard is, let's say even if you have not done a lot of things, or even if you have not set up any security related things in your project, I would still recommend you go do the OpenSSF, because whatever the score is, it will give you guidelines on what needs to be done to mitigate those issues. So if I look into this, right, so dependency update tool, there's basically depend-a-bot or something like that needs to be set up so that it could detect the dependency or the vulnerability that comes through the dependencies. So you could check the documentation. Any of GitHub offers the depend-a-bot for all public repositories, so you could enable that. Similarly, maintain, this is a new repo, so we just created before starting the session, so it's giving the score as 0. That this score will eventually improve over the time. And then the code review guidelines, right? So again, this is because a new project, initial few commits, few settings were done before we implemented the branch protection. So the rating is low, and slowly when we start making contribution, and if you still see this, then you can drill down, see the logs, what's happening, why are they giving this score even though we have everything enabled for very long time, and then probably there may be some setting in the branch protection you might have missed, so you could enable those. And similarly, like binary artifact token permissions, and like, so yeah, on the vulnerabilities, as she mentioned, like first thing, it checks if there are vulnerability. That's the first part. Second is on the incident response. Like let's say someone in the public, they discovered a vulnerability on your open source package. If you have not defined the security policies on how the incident response should be, they could disclose it. Even like just because you have not defined the guidelines, so they can go make it public, and that would impact very badly on your project. So in order to do that, first, sorry, I need to go to the repository settings. And then if I go to the code security and analysis part, there's this option called private vulnerability reporting. We need to enable that. And then this is the dependent bot I was talking about from the OpenSSF scorecard, right? So we'll need to enable those settings. So now once you have enabled the private vulnerability reporting here, you'll need to go back to your repository and define a file called security dot. Yeah, you'll need to define the security.md file. Let me see. Oops. Yeah, so if you go into the security, this gets enabled, like report a vulnerability, and that's where you could, I mean, if someone finds a vulnerability in your project, they could go and report that vulnerability. And coming back, yeah, some of these things may not apply for your project. Like let's say if it's not a application which requires like fuzzing type of thing, then it may still not be applied. So that's when you have settings in the OpenSSF to disable some of these rules. So you could go ahead and do that. And then yeah, static code analysis, I think when we went into the security part of the project, there's an option to enable the static scanning as well. Yeah, secret scanning, and then there are in this code scanning part we can add in workflows to set up automated static or SAST analysis on your repositories. And I think yeah, most of the things. And when you start a new project, I'll just go to that screen and I'll some of them. So first thing we recommend is like you need to add a readme file here, like, and maybe you can update, and then make sure you mention the git ignore file based on what project you are using. With many times I've seen people creating git ignore files on their own, and they miss out on some folders where they keep their secrets or private, whatever the keys, and that may go public. So better use the template which comes like based on your language or whatever the application is, and then add your additional repositories which you are using into the git ignore. And the second part is the licensing. This becomes very important because I think 3 months ago I don't recall the project now, they had not defined the licensing of their open source repository because it was not so popular, but someone forked it up because there's no licensing policy, and then they added something on top of it, and it became huge, and they started making money out of it, and even when they went to court they couldn't get anything out of it. So better add in the licenses based on what your project is. So yep, I think that's on this. Probably I think good part about the OpenSSF scorecard is it's pretty like it takes 10 minutes to set it up. So you can go in, especially with if you have GitHub Actions enabled in your organization, or I mean where the repository is hosted. This you can just enable it in less than 10 minutes. You go there, you go into the code QL or the code scanning part and add this 2 lines there. Right, you can use this action and add just 2 lines, like on every pull request, run this action, and it kind of starts from there. So we'll go there. Where's this repo? So this the location where you go to the code scanning, and say in the other tool you can click on explore workflows, and here on this page you search for OpenSSF scorecard, and you get this. Just click on configure, and if you are fine, you can just keep this as is, and then see the results, and based on the results, if something is not applicable to you, something you need to probably add some custom comparison checks or something, you can come back here, add those into the rules, and then again update it and get the scorecard changes reflected. So this is, I think, yep, that's with this. Yeah, thank you for your time. OpenSSF.
Thank you for your time, and definitely check out the security guidelines for new project from CNCF, and would love to have your thoughts as security practitioners. This is a peer-reviewed work, a voluntary work that we've done, and if you have any comments, feedback or suggestions for this project, we'd love to hear it from you.